versus Board of Education was a 1954 United States Supreme Court case that outlawed racial segregation of schools. The case began as a class action lawsuit, then wound its way through lower courts and federal district courts before finally reaching Chief Justice Warren and his colleague on the highest court of the United States. The Supreme Court's decision relied heavily on a new interpretation of the Equal Protection Clause, the 14th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. Rather than disparate but equal, logic of earlier decisions like Plessy versus Ferguson. Brown versus Board of Education asserted that due process and equal protection of the laws were fundamentally incompatible with segregation. This led to the opening of public schools to Black Americans across the nation. As a result, there would be no separate schools for Black Americans and white Americans, but unified schools for all Americans.
Okay guys, so in this section, I would like to explain the background of the case Brown v. Board of Education. This background is important because it helps us understand why the case became a major turning point in the fight against racial segregation in the United States. In the early 20th century, racial segregation in the United States was legally permitted under the Separate but Equal Doctrine established by Plessy v. Ferguson 1896. This doctrine allowed racial segregation in public facilities so long as the facilities provided to each race were considered equal. In practice, however, schools for African American children were significantly underfunded and inferior in quality compared to those for white children. In 1951, Oliver Brown, an African American parent, filed a lawsuit against the Board of Education of Topeka, Kansas, after his daughter Linda Brown was denied admission to nearby all-white elementary school. This lawsuit was later consolidated with several similar cases from other states and brought before the United States Supreme Court. Brown v. Board of Education became a defining moment in the struggle for civil rights, challenging the constitutionality of racial segregation in public education. The Supreme Court's landmark decision in 1954 ultimately marked the end of legally sanctioned segregation in American public schools. Thank you for your attention.
Today I would like to give presentation on Oliver Brown v. the Topeka Board of Education of Kansas. In the case the world became most famous, a plaintiff named Oliver Brown filed a class action suit against the Board of Education of Topeka, Kansas in 1951 at the its daughter Linda Brown was denied entrance to Topeka's all-white elementary school. In his lawsuit, Brown claimed the school for black children were not equivalent to the white school, and the segregation violated the so-called Equity Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment, and at with holds that no state can deny to any person within its jurisprudence the equity protection of the law. The case went before the Your District Court in Kansas, which agreed the public school segregation had a detrimental effect upon the colored children and contributed to a sense of interior, but still upheld the separate but equal doctrine. Thank you.
So I will explain why segregation was a serious problem. Basically, this case revealed that school segregation created really serious inequality. Black students and white students were separated, and this separation violated basic human rights because every child deserves fair and equal education. It also went against the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause, which says that the government must treat everyone equally. In reality, school for black children had far fewer facilities and opportunities than school for white children. Segregation also caused psychological harm, and this was proven through the Dole test, where black children showed feelings of inferiority because of how society treated them. Beyond that, segregation made it harder for black communities to grow socially and economically, and if this system continued, it would create deeper social divisions and increase racial tensions.
On May 17, 1954, United States Supreme Court Justice Warren delivered the unanimous ruling in the landmark civil rights case of Brown v. Board of Education of Topeka, Kansas. State-sanctioned segregation of public school was violation for the 14th Amendment and was therefore unconstitutional. This historic decision marked as the end of the separate but equal precedent set by the Supreme Court nearly 16 years earlier in Plessy v. Ferguson and served as catalyst to expanding human rights movement during the decade of 1950. Arguments were to be heard during the next term to determine just how the rule would be imposed. Just over 1 year later, on May 31, 1955, Warren read the court's decision, now revered as Brown II, instructing the state to begin the segregation plan with all deliberate speed.
Hello guys, I would like to convey the conclusion of the case above. Brown vs. Board of Education 1954 held that state-sponsored segregation of public school was unconstitutional because separate but equal. Schools were inherently unequal. The case began when Oliver Brown sued after his daughter was denied entrance to a white school. The decision became a major victory for the civil rights movement and led to nationwide school desegregation.